Hi there, this is Erica Merrill, and I'm the founder of Perfect Legal Video. And I am very excited to bring to you today attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee out of Worcester, Massachusetts. She owns a family law firm there. She is just amazing. She knows everything about family law, I swear. And she's got amazing experience. She's got some testimonials. I cannot even tell you what some of them say because people just think that she is the right amount of everything to do what she does to be effective. So check out those testimonials if you get a chance. But anyway, today we're going to be talking with Nicole about mediation and all of the information that you need to know about whether you should do it or not, what are the benefits, does it work, all of those things. So without further ado, welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the kind words, and I look forward to helping as many people as I can.
Absolutely, and I know you already have. So let's talk about mediation. First, simply let's talk about the definition of mediation.
So mediation is something that we do outside of the courts. You're basically going to a third party to try to resolve issues. That's the general gist of why you would go to a mediator. The topics can be varied and very expansive, but for purposes of when you go and sit in a mediation room, you know that all of the information that you say to that mediator is confidential. Everything is voluntary. So at any point in time when you say, I'm done with this, this isn't working, you're free to leave. Mediation itself is done where both parties are making a determination. So it's not the mediator making the decision, it's the parties that are there that are having the dispute. They're the ones that are going to make the final decision on an agreement and what those terms look like. And most importantly, the mediator itself is a neutral third party. So they're not taking sides. They may give information, but they are not taking sides, and they would just want you to understand what your rights are. So a lot of times they'll give you hypotheticals and let you think about things so that you can make that educated decision.
I mean, that all sounds great. So basically, you're going to a mediator with your spouse who you intend to divorce. Do you bring your own attorney or can you just go alone?
Really up to you. It's what you're comfortable with. Sometimes parties are comfortable with just the three of you in the room, husband and wife in that scenario, and the mediator. Other times they don't like to be in that situation. And a lot of times it's usually because somebody is the financial person, somebody's a breadwinner, somebody has control mentally or otherwise. And so they use that as leverage. So they think that if the attorney's in the room with them, then obviously it will level the playing field. So it's really up to you. I would say if nothing else, you always want to have an attorney review any documents that are drafted by the mediator, just to make sure that it's fair for you as well.
So if you have an attorney, are they allowed to mediate the case? How does that work?
So your attorney cannot mediate the case. So if you hire me, I can't mediate your case for you because I've already given you legal advice. I'm representing you. Therefore, I'm no longer a neutral third party. However, if you contact my office and say, hey, I'm looking to do a mediation and I don't give you any information particular about your case, then obviously we could book a session where I would mediate with you and or your spouse or whoever the other party is.
I mean, that sounds really, really good. I mean, is it a lot less expensive than hiring an attorney?
It certainly has the potential to be so. A lot of times when you are litigating a case, you could spend $10,000 to $50,000 in legal fees, and that's the norm depending on what the issues are that you're disputing with your spouse. In some particular cases, obviously it could be as low as $2,000, but those are not necessarily the norm. What you are doing is when you're going to a mediator is you're paying for one particular person. So not each side is paying for two attorneys, to negotiate settlement. You're paying for one person to sit in a room rather than that two people that are obviously adversarial, and that is their role, to not be neutral and to be adversarial. So it's a different tone. The only concern is that you both have to be willing. You both have to understand that there are going to be concessions that need to be made. The question is, how big are those concessions? And the reality is, you won't know until you go into that situation and figure out what works best for you.
So how long does mediation take? Is it faster than getting a regular divorce?
It certainly has the potential of being a lot faster than a regular divorce. So generally speaking, a divorce has a 14-month track, which means from beginning to end, a normal track, you're getting divorced anywhere from 9 months on the short end all the way up to 2 years. In a mediation, depending on how quickly those mediation sessions happen, it can be as simple as 1 or 2 weeks before you have an agreement, and then you submit it to the court for approval. Once the court approves it, it's going to be 4 months. So it certainly has the ability to be a lot shorter.
Wow. I mean, so you've answered a little bit of my next question then, in that the mediation sounds like it could be less expensive, or has the potential to be less expensive, as well as not last as long. So what are the other benefits that mediation might bring?
I think the biggest benefit is that people actually listen to each other. When they're in that room, it's kind of like, you're going to family counseling without going to family counseling, because you're forced to listen to what the other party says. And the mediator, any good mediator, is going to say something that in turn has information for you, such as, hey, what I heard you say was X, Y, and Z. A lot of times people don't understand what the other party is saying. When a mediator can change that wordage to mean what you thought you heard, a lot of times it makes sense.
So I can see that there's a lot of benefits to mediation, but I have heard some horror stories too. So I know that you've got some gotchas to talk about today. What should we look out for with mediation?
I think the biggest thing to look out in mediation is do your homework. Figure out who's mediating the case. Understand what their background is, what their experience is. You can pretty much mediate any type of case, but if you have somebody that's really good at mediating civil cases and you're going there for a divorce, they need to know every single thing that needs to be put into an agreement. If they don't, then the court is going to reject it. The court rejects it, you're back at square one. So now you spend all this money in mediation, you're gonna have to pay to go back for them to fix it. And at the end of the day, it's not gonna help you. So I think that's the biggest issue. I think the other thing is really, the benefit is listening to your spouse. The burden is also listening to your spouse, because unfortunately you are gonna hear things that are not flattering to you. You do have to learn to take it in strides. The reality is, I've done lots of mediations where people walk out of there crying. But at the end of the day, sometimes people need to be heard. And really, that's what makes a good mediation, is if somebody can really vent, and it is a neutral zone. So if you can really vent without, slinging mud and being nasty about it, just saying, I think you were an absentee parent. I think that you could have done this better. Those are the types of things that are, critical criticism. But at the end of the day, they're not finger pointing at you per se. They're just saying, hey, maybe you should look at your character a little bit. And a lot of times people will actually look at that, not necessarily in mediation, but later on, and go, hey, maybe I did do something wrong. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. And it allows them to reflect. So I think that there are benefits and burdens to that.
I mean, that's a really interesting point, because, obviously, even in the friendliest breakups, there's going to be some animosity. There's a reason that you broke up. And if you're discussing some very key issues in the breakup, then, some of this dirt is going to come out, and, people aren't going to like it. So, personally, I think that that's why you should have an attorney there, even if it is a mediation, only because while you're going through those emotions, it's nice to have somebody who is professional and can speak for you without letting that anger get out. I mean, I don't know if you would agree with that, but that's just my feeling.
I do agree with that to a certain degree. I think, absolutely what you said was spot on. Is sometimes it's emotional baggage and you're just overwhelmed as the client and you're like, oh my God, I can't function. I can't even adapt to this. What is going on? And you're flabbergasted is what is being said. And you're like, I can't, what? And you just lose it. So I think that's when the attorney does need to step in. I think the only concern that I always have with attorneys is sometimes they want to be adversarial. And again, a mediation should be advocating for your client without being adversarial. So there's a fine line there where attorneys sometimes jump a little bit over the line, and that makes it a little bit harder as a mediator to kind of reel it back in and say, we're here to try to resolve things. And so we have, as mediators, have to keep kind of going back to that. Okay, well, maybe we should take a break right now, let everyone cool off for a few minutes, and then let's go back. Those are the types of things that will allow people to continue with mediation without getting their hostilities too high.
I think that is a really great point. Now, speaking of things that get people heated and upset, let's talk about some of the issues that are mediated during a mediation.
So you can really resolve anything in a mediation. I've resolved things that are neighbor disputes, have nothing to do with divorces. So it could be something that's simple. I have people that I've mediated for, breach of contracts, for purchase of cars. Anything that you have a dispute on that can go into the courts can be mediated. Obviously, in the bigger realm, there's a whole avenue for family law. And again, you want to make sure you have an attorney that has that family law background. But certainly that's what you do. So we can do a divorce, we can do a modification. The modifications can be on everything. It could be on removal of the children to another state. It could be custody. It could be support. It could be parenting time. We can handle contempts where one party didn't comply with a court order. So there's a lot of variables. And again, people that weren't even married, you can do paternity cases. So the possibilities are endless. Literally anything that has a court action or can have a court action can be mediated. And a good attorney and a good mediator is going to be able to draft up that document so that the judge in the court approves that document.
Well, that's really good to know that, I hadn't even thought of that you can use a mediator for all types of issues, not just divorce. I mean, it's one of the common ones that you hear being used in, but that's a really great way for people to save on attorney fees and make things go faster if everyone can sit down and be reasonable and keep their tempers and their emotions out of it.
Absolutely.
So can we talk a little bit, we've talked about how it's less expensive, and I believe you touched on the cost, but if you can just kind of give us an idea of what does mediation typically cost? You've given us the idea of the times.
So each mediator does things a little bit differently. I'm a firm believer that I should not be charging you extra than I would in my normally rate. My normal hourly rate is what is going to dictate how much mediation is going to cost, and I'm going to bill you out in the increment of the hours. That's one of those things that when you're researching people, you want to know. There are a lot of attorneys out there that are saying, well, because potentially I can't represent these two parties, I'm going to charge them $100 or $200 more per hour. And I just scratch my head and say, I'd rather have a good mediation with two people that think I did a good job and refer me out to other people, or if they have problems in the future, they can come back to me and mediate, that I don't think that it's warranted to have that extra fees per hour. And I do charge a flat fee for whatever particular document prep I'm doing. So for example, in a separation agreement and doing all the things related to a divorce, currently that cost is $850. If it's something simple where it's a one-page document, obviously I'm not going to charge you that much. But again, it kind of depends on what you're there for and what resolution you're looking for.
Well, that's really good to know. And I have heard that too, where some people will try to charge double their fee because they're doing double the work and they don't get to do the whole divorce case where they'd make a lot more money. I think that's wonderful that you do it in a fair way and you're looking at it as a way to, maybe get some repeat business and some referrals in the future. It's just a really a good example of how fair-minded you are in the work that you do. So that being said, how do I find a mediator if I need one?
Obviously, you can do what everyone else does, look it up, Google it, that type of thing. I think, again, the big thing going back here is there's a lot of services out there. See what their accreditations are. Ask them what their accreditations are. Ask them what they do in terms of, how much experience they had. How many mediations do they do? What type of law do they practice? Those are all things, because again, I can mediate a breach of contract, but what is my experience? Those are the particular questions that you should be asking a mediator. You should be interviewing them, asking them what specific knowledge they have of these things. And we don't necessarily need to have full knowledge of it. I don't need to know how the mechanics of a car works or doesn't work. That's really irrelevant to me. At the end of the day, the question is, how can we resolve that issue? So those are the types of things that a lot of people don't ask about. Or more particularly, go to a mediator that doesn't have experience specifically with family law. You need to find an attorney that has mediation experience in family law to do family law. Everybody has to have certifications. They have to keep their certifications up on a regular basis. Those are the types of things that you should be interviewing them and asking them about.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And going to all this trouble to find a mediator, pay for a mediator, how often does it work?
I can successfully say that I'm about 95%, if not more. I really have had just a handful of cases that I haven't been successful in mediating myself. So I think that it works really well. I've had clients that have come back to me. I've had clients that have wanted to renegotiate some of the terms later on in life. Maybe the children are older or things of that nature. So again, I think if you go in there with an open mind, you're going to be successful. But it takes two people at least, who are the parties that are mediating the case, to come in with that open mind. So if one person comes in with a closed mind or says, I'm not going to give you those documents, and I've had that. If you don't want to show us the documents and you don't want to show us the numbers, then guess what? Mediation is not going to work. It's voluntary. If you're not willing to disclose anything, one of the things that everybody has to sign is that they've had full and fair disclosure of all income, assets, and liabilities. If you're not willing to do that, then don't waste the mediator's time, don't waste your money, and don't waste the other party's time, because it's not going to work. So just make sure you come in with an open mind, and realistically, if you have that, a lot of times we can work out those issues. We can figure out those little tweaks, because usually that's what it boils down to, is little tweaks of certain things that each party cares about a little bit more than the other.
That's a really good way to put it. So once you've done all the work, are the agreements binding, or can somebody go back on them later on?
They're not binding until they become court orders. However, that being said, you can put language in there that says that it's binding, but again, it needs to be approved by a court if it is something that is going to be court approved. Certainly it is binding in the fact that it is a contract, but if you're getting a divorce, one of the standards is that the judge has to find that it's fair and reasonable and provides for all of your income, assets, and liabilities. So if it doesn't have that language in there, or something is missing, or it's so unfair, like somebody's getting 85% of an estate and another person is only getting that 15%, but most importantly, that person makes less money, that's not going to be fair to the court, so they're not going to approve it. So again, going back to, it should always be approved by a court, and that would always be my recommendation.
Well, that is good information. And after you're done in mediation, how long does it usually take to get an approval by the court?
Depends on what document we're drafting up. If it's something that is just a stipulation on a breach of contract and there's an action, or a small claim suit, or things of that nature, a lot of times they will be done administratively. Certain modifications are going to be approved administratively, again, depending on which court we're talking about. Judgments on divorce, they have to be presented to the court. So it all kind of depends on what the underlying complaint is and how we can resolve that. So once we get it, we can submit it to the court. When the court approves it is really depending on the court schedule, but generally a lot of things can be done administratively, and the things that can't, generally about a month's time frame.
Wow. So that's great. I mean, it doesn't sound like it takes too long at all. And so, I mean, this has been some really great information, and we've gone over a lot today. Is there anything that you'd like to bring up? I mean, in specific issues like, that have to do with the children or alimony or anything like that?
Again, I'm going to go back to the same thing. I think, everyone has to be fair about it. I think everyone needs to disclose their numbers. A lot of times that's the biggest issue is, well, I don't want to disclose it. Or more importantly, they want to sit in the mediation room and go, hey, it says on my phone, let me go type that in. Yeah, my Bank of America account says I have, let's see. And they're looking down and then they're showing their phone to the docs. Great, but be prepared, have those documents ready. We've all given you a list beforehand. So if you want to waste your time going, oh, what's my login again? That's wasting your time. You're spending money on a mediator. Come prepared, come and have those documents ready. Even if you don't have multiple copies to share with the other party, I guarantee you the mediator has a copy machine and they can copy those documents. So sometimes it's not necessarily an issue because the parties agree, but again, why take that time for mediation? Because it does kind of slow down the process and makes it a little choppy as a mediator, because now we're not flowing because we're at a 5-minute standstill while you're logging into your phone and figuring out what your passcode is.
Well, that sounds like a very expensive wait and to try to look up information. And I'm sure that they have to go back and give you the documents later anyway, if that happens.
Most likely, yes.
So, well, this has really been fantastic and informative as usual. I do want to mention that if you are looking for a mediator, Nicole is actually a mediator as well as a family lawyer. She can fill both of those roles. So if you have any questions, feel free to give Nicole and her office a call. They are fantastic. They are non-judgmental of you and your situation. They are really great at just giving you your options after looking at all of the facts and, really helping guide you to find your decisions. Because you know what, if you try to do this on your own, it could cost you tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run, in a mistake that you may not have known about, an asset, because you didn't know that you should ask for all of that information. And, Nicole's got testimonials where, there have been assets that weren't going to be considered in a negotiation. And, she was able to find someone who, needed the help, a lot of extra money. And, she just did a fantastic job. Can you give an example of, a time that you were able to find an asset and negotiate for somebody, the fact that they should have that asset as part of the agreements that you were coming up with?
Yes, I have lots of those. I think one in particular comes to mind. And it was a client that came to me. Unfortunately, she had some medical issues, so her ability to communicate was limited. But I worked with her to understand what assets she thought there was. She was correct on those assets. We were able to actually find out even more assets. And at the end of the day, because of due diligence and research and subpoenas and lots of discovery, we were able to get that client. The original offer was, I believe, $13,000. At the end of the day, we did settle that for $300,000. So my client is able now to retire, to get some assets that she needs, and to use those assets for the rest of her life, because unfortunately she's not going to get any other sources of income due to her illness.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, and that's life-changing for that woman. So it is just a great example of the many cases that you've been able to help with, just like that woman. And people don't believe it, but once they are done the divorce, or even, I'm sure, at many other issues that you've mediated, it really changes people's lives, because a lot of times people are living in pain for years, emotional pain, maybe, there's a lot of different situations, but when you are free of that and you're able to start living your life again, it's an unbelievable transformation for them. And so on behalf of your clients, I'll thank you for all of your help for everyone. And I absolutely encourage people to call Nicole and find out what her opinion is on your case, and hopefully she can help you out. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nicole. You've been great, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week.
Thank you.